Good evening, friends. Welcome aboard. Well, it is a quiet house tonight. I did not bring the dogs in here, so we'll see what happens. But anyhow, we are in Ezra chapter 6, verses 13 through 22. The title of the sermon of the night is Purity Makes a Heart Prosper. Now, in many cases, we don't think about this, but I think both Paul and James point to this in this idea, and Paul references it in Ephesians 2, and James talks about this idea that faith without works is dead. And there is a purifying force to this, and what they're actually discussing is that as it related to the mindset of a Jew at that time, that works that were good, or the byproduct of morality, if you will, were considered obedience to God. Now, obviously, there were many other things going on as it relates to the conduct of the Pharisees and the introduction of heresy and all this other stuff. But there was a point in time where there was a purity, if you will, at least considering what God wanted. And it didn't mean that the people always followed it, but God had given them a list of traditions and or a list of behavior that was going to be acceptable to Him. And as we roll through this, we're seeing the restructuring of this occur as the temple is being rebuilt. And there has to be a purifying that occurs. And you'll see, if you read through it, you'll see how the priests were chosen. They were put in charge of the work and the rest. And there was a purification process. And they consulted, who was going to be who, as it relates to the priest, consulting the history and the records and the understanding of things and how this all plays out. But ultimately, as the temple is brought together, it is for the restructuring of a society that rebelled against the very thing that they've been called to put at the center at this second chance, if you will. That here they are coming from exile. And I think it's interesting that in the month of Adar, which would be around March, I think, for us, or Adar, they celebrate Esther and Mordecai's victory over Haman and this idea of what had occurred in Babylon and the rest. And so here they are back in their homeland, and the temple's being finalized. Well, if you go back to chapter 5, you'll see the lull in the work was addressed by the prophets. And the prophets are pushing. Zechariah and Haggai are pushing. They're saying, hey, this has to be done. Why are we not doing this? Why are we not moving forward? God will give you the strength. And so if you look at, I'll give you point 1 tonight. The voice of the prophet, the voice of the prophets build the house of God, verses 13 through 15. All right. Point 1. And a true prophet is going to press the issue. I was just reading through my notes and laughing about times and seasons, because the end of this is a discussion over the stand that we took and how it isn't for the sake of results as it relates to people's opinion. People's opinion are going to be all over the place for a while. It is what it is. I mean, because of what we did and how we did, and the fact that not really a whole lot of other people did, their opinions have been shaped by what's politically expedient. Now, the sad part is I think that as they begin to see the consequences of these decisions, and some of these decisions are long-term consequences. They really are. You're talking about a number of people that suffered, died, and will continue to die because of this. And people say, well, that's just conspiracy. You hang on. I pray that God gives you eyes to see and ears to hear, and you begin to understand what happens in this world and why things are what they are. And so when those that are politically connected and motivated begin to look at things as a test case to see how cooperative people will be, and they admit it publicly, probably a good time to pay attention. It would stink to be wrong twice. All right. So I don't care whether they make something that is syringe or a nasal spray. No. Answer is no. All right. So a true prophet will press the issue. Why? Because they are called to make you choose. They're called to make you choose. That's what they do. Point 2, completion requires sacrifice. What is that? Well, it's a dedication to the work of the kingdom. And why is it a sacrifice? Because it's going to cost you. As I was reading through this tonight, I was chuckling because there have been points where I have prayed for certain things in certain times. And the Lord says, sure, I'll accomplish that. And you say, well, does he really talk like that? Yeah, he does. I can remember some very specific seasons. He said, but it's going to cost you something. Like you're going to have to sacrifice for this. You're going to have to give for this. It's going to require something of you, which I think has got me thinking about the book of James in that sense, that faith without works. If you look at the word that James is using, I think I was studying it earlier, ergon, E-R-G-O-N is the way we pronounce it. I won't even try the Greek, but I think it's 2041 in the reference. You could look that up. That number sticks out for me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it would be a location within a concordance in the Greek. 2041 would be your reference number. But anyway, the word encompasses a ton of different discussions with regard to work. But in essence, if you boil it down to an understanding of culture, the idea was very simple, that faith without obedience, in essence, if there was no fruit to what had occurred in you, then there has been nothing that has occurred in you. And this doesn't disagree with Paul. I think it's Ephesians chapter 2, where he says we are saved, we have been created to do good works. And the word's the same word. The word's the same word. And it also includes actual work. It includes spiritual work. And that's why it's important for us to get our heads around this for the season to come. And especially as we begin to deal with taxation issues. I think it's something that has to be addressed. I think the church has allowed this to get way out of control. And the fact that our ability to do good for our neighbor has suffered because of all the different tactics that have been used to make life difficult. All right. So the printing of money is taxation. Inflation is taxation. And if you start figuring out the fact that God has given you your ability and the time you have has been given to you by him. These things belong to him. They don't belong to a government. Then much of this has come out of Marxism. I think his last name was actually Levy before they changed it. But nonetheless, this idea that we belong to the government. No, we don't. We belong to God. First and foremost, we belong to God. And every bit of compromise and the rest that we have allowed to go on as the church and with mindsets of looking eastward at points, not to make too much of it tonight, but we have given ourselves away. And in doing so, we have contributed in many ways to many issues here at home. And I believe it abroad. And I think much of what happens and has happened has cost Christians their lives in other countries for the sake of global strategery and the rest. It's just a bunch of words. And at the end of the day, it seems that every time something happens in a nation in the Middle East with other countries involved that we give money, Christians die en masse. In fact, some of these countries were responsible for the death of Christians, not just in small numbers, in the millions upon millions. That's fact. That's fact. They have cost millions and millions of Christian lives. And at the end of the day, many of them are just servants of Rome in one way or another, which we are not, nor do I have any plans to be. So, point 3, purity brings rescue. When God calls us to separate ourselves, we must respond. And so in this portion of things, as the Lord begins to divide us from the things that sought to destroy us, sought to overthrow us, sought to conquer us, To return back to those things is, well, it's gross. So it may be difficult for us to accept that reality, but Jesus, through his apostles, discusses these ideas and their Old Testament concepts, which is like a dog returning unto his vomit and a pig once clean unto the wallow. Jesus talks about not throwing pearls before the swine and the rest. And for us, these are difficult concepts because I think to a degree we've embraced this idea of not what is said, how it is said. And so we begin to police language or concepts to the point that they can't offend us anymore. And once they get to the place that they can't offend us anymore, it's very difficult to learn. There is considerable weight sometimes in offense that changes our direction, our heart, and our mind. My dad and I were talking about this today. I'll give an example. We moved a lot when I was a kid. People always wonder if we were in the army, the army of the Lord. But my dad was associate pastor at churches. And let me tell you, most churches are terrible to their staff. Terrible. And you'd say, what does that mean? Well, it means that there are a number of senior pastors that are just bald-faced liars. That's what it means. Just bald-faced liars. But we can get into that another day. But I've seen it all, kids. I've seen it all. Anyhow, we moved and I played a little bit of football in Georgia or a little bit of football in Colorado. But beyond that, my dad and I played t-ball, baseball. My dad and I played catch. I knew how to field grounders and do everything. He taught me baseball. So even as a kid in second and third grade, I could play baseball. I don't know if I could play baseball today. I don't even want to pretend. But back then, I could catch anything. And it was fun. We played all the time because we had gloves and a ball, and it was free entertainment. You know what I mean? So nonetheless, we go to Georgia, and football's taken a lot differently in Georgia. I think Colorado is a lot softer, and I was younger. And so we go out the first night, and we start lining up to do hit drills, and I get destroyed. And I keep getting destroyed. I get vapor locked, right? I'm just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I'll never forget that night and the invitation to make a transition in my thinking. We're talking the fourth grade, to where I had to embrace the concept that my fear was causing me more injury. That being brave and actually getting in there and being willing to do what I was supposed to do exactly like I was told was going to cause more consequences for the other party that were negative than for me. And it took a little bit to get there. It took a little bit to, and I remember my dad letting me go through this, and I don't begrudge it at all. I needed to, because in my heart and mind, it moves some things. And you say, well, how significant can it be for a boy at that age? Very, very significant. We played for the Packers in a mosquito-ridden area, and that's what we did. We went and played football and got bit to death. But nonetheless, learned a life lesson in the midst of it. We did, I think, lose every game, but life lessons were learned, okay? So let's dive into the message tonight. Point 1, the voice of the prophet builds the temple or builds the house of God. If you need to look back to the beginning of chapter 5, you can do that because you'll find it there. But let's read verses 13 through 15. Remember, now the governor has received a letter from the king that basically said anybody that interrupts this work and doesn't provide for the work provide for the work of the rebuilding a temple, the prescription of death for that individual is a beam pulled out of their house, they're impaled on it, and then their house is destroyed. So everybody quickly decided it was worth getting the things done that needed to be done. Then Tatenai, the governor of the province beyond the Euphrates River, and Shethar Bosnai, and their colleagues carried out the decree with all diligence, just as King Darius had ordered. I bet they did. And the elders of the Jews were successful in building through the prophecy of Haggai and the prophecy of Zechariah, the son of Iddo. And they finished building following the command of the God of Israel. and the decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Now, this temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar. It was the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Point 1 again. The voice of the prophet builds the house of God. A true prophet will press the issues. Okay? I know that accountability is not very popular in our day and age. Okay? But most often, if we're fair, and let's be fair, okay? Let's just talk about it. Most situations, maybe that you've dealt with, but I know that I have dealt with, whether it be father, mother, sister, brother, whatever else, they typically don't come with a lot of accountability. Especially when your parents and have been, and I'm not saying mine were, I think I had great parents, were a fractured mess. And here's why I think that my parents did a good job. They found out when my mother was in her 40s, or earlier, that she was most likely going to die. And the doctor gave them to her 40s. And in the midst of all of that, my parents didn't really let on that we were struggling with money. They didn't tell us that mom's life had had a timeline put on it by a doctor. They didn't tell us till later. So even as I'm watching my mother nearly die, I didn't even think my mom was going to make it to my graduation from high school. I was blown away that she made it into my senior year. And I remember, crying as I was graduating because she was there in the audience. And I mean, such a weakened state at that point in time. She got down at one point, I think around 77 pounds. But that stuff wasn't discussed. And why wasn't it discussed? Well, because God had given them a vision for the future and things that they were doing in obedience to Him. And I don't know if you realize the amount of pain that you would encounter with that in your life. And being able to put one foot in front of the other. And at a point, my mom stopped being able to put one foot in front of the other because of the issues that she was facing physically. So there were people that had spoken in their life. There were people that gave them direction and they were obedient to that. If, however, you have the inverse, and maybe this offends some and they click off and whatever else, but there isn't a pattern to follow. And so one has to be established in one way or another. And if we've run off the rails to a degree and made a lot of really bad decisions and involved ourselves in abusive situations, or we were the abusive, we have to accept the fact that our mind has to be changed. You say, well, that's all accomplished through Christ. Interesting you say that, because if you did say that, then you haven't read the New Testament enough. Because it is true that it is accomplished through Christ, but Christ uses a lot of different tools to accomplish certain things. Like Peter getting confronted by Paul. Peter getting confronted by Jesus. I mean, after Jesus rose from the dead. The heart's wicked, y'all. The heart's wicked. We do what we always do. And if we don't make big changes, we'll continue one way or another to keep choosing death and destruction. It takes a lot of will in the sense of committing to the promise we have made to Christ to change things. So when the will of God is announced, it immediately creates a divide between the willing and the unwilling. This is where, as it relates to certain times and seasons, this is where evangelists, pastors, and teachers must move in to collectively direct the body towards success. Those sent with the message do not get to change it for convenience or change it for better results. Why is that? Because prophets are called to reinforce what God has said and to state what God has said, and those who are teachers and the rest are called to reinforce it through the word. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3 through 5, it says this, "For a time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires, and will turn away their ears from the truth and turn aside to myths. But you be sober in all things, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, and fulfill your ministry." Now, here's the issue that often prophets run into, right? If we read through the Old Testament and see what they were dealing with, and there's prophets even in the New Testament and the rest, even after the day of the Pentecost, even after churches had been founded. I don't know what cessationists are talking about, but okay. Fine. But nonetheless, these prophets were coming in and dealing with stiff-necked, hard-hearted people. I mean, Jesus quotes the prophets. Rightly did they say, talking about how stiff-necked and hard-hearted the people were and the people he was dealing with. And he's like, man, it's almost tongue-in-cheek when Jesus says, hey, I got to go to Jerusalem, for certain things. That's where they, basically his point is that's where they kill the prophets. That's where they do these things. Man. Point two. Completion requires sacrifice. Picking up at verse 16. "And the sons of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. They offered for the dedication of this temple 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all of Israel, 12 male goats, corresponding with the number of tribes of Israel." And that's a discussion of, the sacrifices. Significant that they offer one for each. "Then they appointed the priests to their divisions and the Levites in their sections for the service of God in Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses." Dedication to the work of the kingdom is going to cost you something. It's going to cost you something. I read this point tonight and I laughed. It's going to cost you something. It can cost you time. It can cost you attention. It can cost you at points convenience, your peace, your schedule, you name it, or it can cost far more. It can cost far more. And there are times where we look at the Word of God and we fail to remember that for those in leadership, we're not supposed to be a burden. We're not supposed to be causing issues. And there are going to be points, friends, that it will require the sacrifice of your opinion to see what is right. You're going to have to accept that there are a certain number of strikes. Not saying you're an idiot or you're wrong all the time. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying there's going to be points where you have to sacrifice your opinion in a certain situation for the restructuring of your thinking so you can see clearly. We see this with Peter. We see it in the early church as it relates to the Jews who are of Christ coming to grips with the reality of the invitation to the Gentiles. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't mean you're always wrong. And in fact, many of you, as we are talking about things, you're developing discernment. You're seeing things. It's getting down to the little things. It's getting down to the nitty gritty where we don't undo ourselves in the small things. So there are times where we're able to see the big things because they're so easy to see. But then the difficulty is getting down into the smaller things that God needs done in our heart to move us into ministry or to move us into leadership. And those are the things we're struggling with. Like, oh man, I need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Or I need to learn to sit on this longer. I need to learn to wait. I need more patience. Or my frustration level is too easily triggered. Or this temper I have. Those are the things. And pressure has to be applied in those areas. We have to be tested. Here, the test is conformity to things that God had already spoken. Now, yes, the things I'm talking about, God's already spoken to those. That's why I want you reading Proverbs, so that it's applicable. You know what the big issue with Proverbs is? A lot of times we read it and we don't apply it to ourselves first and foremost. We think about all the different situations that people have wronged us. If you read scripture and the evaluation is in the manner you've been offended and not the way that you have been an offense, you're missing it. You're missing blessing. Well, I don't want to be wrong all the time. You're going to be. And the longer you avoid the opportunity to face the reality of your own heart, the more issues you're going to have. It's just a fact. It's just, I wish it were different. I wish it were all bubble gum and unicorns and birthday cake. That'd be awesome, but it's not. It's about becoming a bloody mess as we take up our cross and crucify our flesh. It's a mess. It's a mess. And it's a beautiful mess. It's supposed to be. But the crucifixion of the flesh, you're talking about all our hopes and dreams at a point come crashing in, and we are left with Christ and Christ alone. And dealing with that reality. No matter who betrays us, no matter who goes against us, whether it be father, mother, sister, brother, whether it be husband or wife, no matter who it is, no matter what it is, no matter when it is, the reality is at the end of all of this, it's just going to be he and I, you and him. That's it. There's nobody else in between. There's nobody else invited into the conversation. There's no one else. For men, you're going to be evaluated on the way you treated your family. You will. There is going to be a discussion of the fruit of your life. And so if you're not the husband that you know God has called you to be, hey, prepare, buckle up. You're making your choices now. It's going to be what it is. Wives, if it is constant war and there's never a way to be pleasable, I'm not saying you have to submit to abuse. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But is your heart with Christ first and foremost? It is true that Christ paid the price for your salvation, but faith in action has a price. This is why doubt leads to sin. When James talks about a double-minded man being unstable in all his ways, guess what he says? You aren't getting anything from God because you ask and you won't even listen to the answer. If we believe that we can escape the consequences of opposing the world and opposing our lusts and desires and everything that comes out of our heart, because that's where sin originates. I mean, come on. We're dragged away by our own lusts and enticed. If we're unwilling to oppose the world, then we are still of it and we still love it. And guess what? Love of this world is hatred towards God. Christ called us to carry the cross just as he did. You see, the house of God, Bethel, is restored when the people of faith purify themselves and stop playing games. No church can be built through deceit or worldly alliances. No church can be built through manipulation and bullying. It just doesn't work. If you're taking a position of leadership because you muscled your way into it, you're not ready. It's going to eat you. It's going to eat you. I remember having a meeting one time with a young couple long ago about ministry and the rest, and one of the points made in this situation was, well, if you don't have anything for us to do, then I don't know how we can go here. And I said, oh, okay. Well, it was nice knowing you. Love you. I'll be praying for you. If you can't sit still in the presence of God, if you don't know what it means to love your neighbor and to love your husband and your wife and your children first and foremost, how is leadership anything other than idolatry for you? How? See, as a leader of a house, as a leader of a church, you have to be willing not only to take a stand, but willing to die for it. willing to be crucified for it. If you're going to be a shepherd of sheep, you have to be willing to do and say the hard things. You have to be willing to fight the wolves and the bears and the giants and whoever else comes along. But seeing what we've created is a house of convenience. It's coffee shops and donuts. That's what we did, and we fit stuff here and there. But the teaching of the heart brings us to a place of repentance where we can't forget what we look like anymore. And so the more clear who and what we actually are becomes, the more desperate we become to crucify it. There's things, even still to this day, I hate that exist within the brokenness of this state. I don't want at any point to displease God. I don't want at any point to be distracted or delayed or whatever. I don't enjoy the fact that I can't know the things he knows or the things that he needs me to do right away, that it takes time. It's not that I'm not willing to wait. It's just I want to do what he wants done. And I can't say that's 100% true all the time. There are times that God has told me or asked me to do some things I'm not overly excited about. I was at a church years ago, and God sent me a direct message to take a stand against a certain teaching in 2 occasions. And I asked him to please let me not do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. He said, if I can't trust you with this, how is it ever going to be any different? How will I use you to confront those things that you claim are injustices, when in the small things you're just going along to get along? Turn your Bibles to Mark chapter 8, verse 34. See, we must be a people focused on Christ's law of love. If we love him, we will do what he commands. And he summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's sake will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation. Consider that. Consider what Jesus is saying. In what type of generation? Adulterous, sinful. The Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Point 3, purity brings rescue. Let's read the last part here, verse 19. The exiles held the Passover on the 14th of the first month, for the priests and the Levites had purified themselves together, and all of them were pure. Then they slaughtered the Passover lambs for all the exiles, both for their brothers, the priests, and for themselves, and the sons of Israel who returned from exile, and all those who separated themselves from the impurity of the nations of the land to join them, to seek the Lord God of Israel, ate the Passover. And they held the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days with joy, because the Lord had made them happy, and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them, to encourage them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. Last point. Purity brings rescue. When God calls us to separate ourselves, we must respond. The only reason we delay is out of fear, and if fear is what is driving us to delay, guess what? It's all rebellion. It's rebellion. Why is that? Because we fear rejection. We fear rejection and trial more than we fear defying God. And if that is the case, then we have no idea who he is or what he's all about. Lord, I don't want to go through this because it's going to make me uncomfortable. Lord, I don't want to be disciplined, and I don't want to behave myself, and I don't want proper boundaries. I just want to do what I've always done, even if it destroys me and my children and everything else involved. Okay. We cannot claim to love God. We cannot claim to love a God we refuse to serve. Faith without works is dead. The children of Israel knew that what God had done in Egypt, but they refused to remain steadfast. Why is this the case? Because the human heart is treacherous. It is not good. It is not good. I just watched this the other day. I was talking to my dad about it. I was reading something on, because there's a lot of this talk again. They're trying to push this toxic masculinity thing and how testosterone is the problem. And I can't remember what type of doctor this was that was having the conversation, but they did a study where they put testosterone in men. And what they found is that testosterone actually amplifies whatever the person already is. He said, so if the person's brave and does good deeds, like they like to do good things, then they do more of them. They become increasingly that. And if they're demented or twisted or a psycho, that gets raised. Well, then it comes down to the essence of what we have chosen to be, does it not? Right? It's a discussion of the heart. So no matter what the external forces are upon an individual, what will ultimately come to the surface is what they are. The pressure that is applied, doesn't matter if it's a single circumstance or multiple circumstances, but when the pressure is applied on who and what they actually are, it goes pop and comes to the surface. So if we find ourselves starting to long for the things of old, we're looking at the wallow of mud and a pile of vomit, we're thinking, it kind of looks inviting. What are we ignoring? What's the pressure that's currently on us? And is it our own? Are we creating it because we refuse to be obedient? Or are we promising to do a bunch of things that God never called us to do? It's possible. Probably a good time to slow down. And if the human heart is of this nature and is not good, and we are often short-sighted, we are often vindictive and angry, and even at times abusive, then it is necessary for us to get around a group of people who will encourage us not to be those things. Like, we need to be in person, face to face. And if there are issues that need to be hashed out, we'll do it. Sure. But those seasons are kind of tough because it demands a true and honest answer. You got to get down to the guts of what is actually going on. You got to get down to the guts of what's going on. I have a little bit in here of an encouragement to the church because we had just gone through a lot when I wrote this. This was written in 2020. For the record, I changed nothing. So it was saying, once again, I'm proud of you and that we were ready for this fight with the state of California and whoever else wanted it. All right? Still am. Are we still going through things? Are we still being purified? Are we still being pushed? Are we a smaller church now? Sure. Are we kind of all up in each other's business because we know and love one another? Yes. And as much as it may bother some, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Some of you have been without family. And now you have it and you're wondering, how in the world do I adjust to this? Some of you are wondering, do I want family? Because it seems to be that they're going to hold me to account as it relates to the world or the word and call me to reject the world and the call of things that we've known before. Yeah. Because hell is real. You can find those places that tell you you can live like garbage and still love Jesus. But I read you that verse out of 2 Timothy chapter 4, 3 through 5. That's who they are. Those are wolves. Wolves and weirdos. Mostly weirdos, because I think wolves are kind of cool, and most of these dudes are just weirdos. Like they're not the, not passing backgrounds kind of guys, if you know what I mean. So, anyway, Ephesians chapter 6, 10 through 13. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the scheme of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. You need to stand firm. I don't know what you're facing right now. I'm not saying it's easy. But if you see the walls of the temple are down, if you see the foundation's not even built, you know where the problem is, right? Because we are to be the temple of the Holy Spirit. So whether it be just your own heart or whether it be issues in your household, who's taking up the cause in prayer? Who's fasting? Are we allowing our anxieties to rule our decisions? Are we allowing them to rule our outlook? Are we taking personal preference as absolutely the priority over scriptural mandates? These are all great questions to ask. And when the answers start adding up to the fact that we ourselves have been in rebellion and the situations are where they are at because we have rebelled, just like Ezra and the restructuring of the temple. Why was this going on? Because they had been in rebellion. They had been in rebellion. If you're not willing to slow down and look at patterns, look at patterns. What are we throwing our lives away for? What are we attempting to gain? Because it's fleeting. I don't care what you think you're choosing. If it keeps you happy for 4 years or 40 years, you still stand before God. You're still going to be judged. It's going to happen. We go, oh no, we don't have. Read it again. Read it again, Christian. Read it again. Good Lord. Anyhow, I love you guys. Sunday, 11:15. I hope to see you there. It's 7:48 and I'm signing off. But I am praying for you and I want to see you thrive. I really do. See you soon.